All right, so gather round close. This one's very interesting. It's about what it was really like when storms came in medieval times. Not the romanticized version with cozy castles and crackling fires, but the actual experience of ordinary people huddled in wooden and thatch houses, watching the sky darken, hearing the wind pick up, knowing that the next few hours could change everything. Because storms in medieval times weren't just weather. They were events that entire communities had to survive together. Imagine you're living in a medieval village, maybe in England or France, sometime around the 1300s. It's late afternoon in autumn, and you've been working in the fields all day. The air has that strange quality it gets before storms, heavy and still, pressing down on everything. The birds have gone quiet. The cattle are restless, moving in tight circles, refusing to settle. And the sky to the west has taken on that particular greenish-gray color that means serious weather is coming. You don't have weather apps or forecasts or meteorologists telling you what to expect. You have observation, experience, and generations of accumulated knowledge about how nature behaves before storms. Your grandfather taught you to watch the clouds, to notice how they move and build. Your mother taught you to read animal behavior, because animals know before humans do. The old woman in the village, the one everyone calls wise, she can smell rain coming from miles away, can tell you whether it'll be a quick shower or a dangerous storm. And today, everything is telling you this will be bad. The clouds aren't just dark, they're roiling, building into massive towers that seem to reach the top of the sky. The wind that was still an hour ago is now gusting, carrying the smell of rain and electricity. Your skin prickles. Animals making sounds you rarely hear, anxious lowing from cattle, strange calls from birds heading inland from the coast. The church bell rings, not the normal pattern for services, but the urgent clanging that means everyone needs to prepare. This is the community warning system, the only mass communication available. When that bell rings in that particular pattern, everyone knows what it means. Storm coming, secure everything, get to safety. Children playing in the village square stop their games and run home. People working in fields drop their tools and hurry to shelter. The blacksmith banks his forge, the miller secures his mill. You head home quickly, your mind running through everything that needs to be done before the storm hits. Your house is typical for your class, a small structure with wooden frames, wattle and daub walls, and a thatched roof. It's kept you dry through many rains, but storms like this coming one are different. Storms test every weakness in your dwelling, find every gap, every loose thatch, every poorly sealed opening. First priority, the animals. You have a few chickens, maybe a pig, a goat if you're fortunate. These animals live outside normally, in a small pen or shelter beside your house. But during serious storms, they come inside. Yes, inside your living space. Because if the storm is bad enough to worry about, it's bad enough to kill exposed animals. Wind can collapse their shelters, lightning can strike them, flooding can drown them. So you herd them into your house, into the corner farthest from the door, where they'll be safe and relatively dry. Your house suddenly smells much worse. Wet chicken feathers, goat musk, pig smell, all mixing with the smoke from your fire and the general mustiness of medieval homes. But this is normal. This is what you do. Animals are wealth, food, survival. You protect them the same way you protect your children, because losing them could mean your family starves this winter. Next, securing the house itself. Your shutters are simple wooden panels that cover the few small windows you have. Glass is for rich people, for churches and nobles. You have open windows with shutters, and now you bar those shutters closed, checking that the leather hinges are solid, that the bars will hold against strong wind. You check the door, make sure it's secure. You look up at your thatched roof from inside, checking for weak spots, places where water might get through. Thatch roofs are amazing technology, really. When properly maintained, they shed rain beautifully, keeping the interior dry. But they require constant maintenance and they have vulnerabilities. Strong wind can tear thatch loose, can rip entire sections away, leaving your home exposed. Heavy rain can eventually soak through if it lasts long enough, and lightning can set thatch on fire instantly, turning your shelter into a death trap. You've done what you can to prepare the roof. Last week you noticed a loose section and repaired it, weaving new straw in, making it secure. But you can't know if it's enough until the storm tests it. This uncertainty is part of medieval life. You do your best and hope and pray that it's sufficient. Your family gathers inside. Your wife, your children, maybe your elderly parent who lives with you. Everyone's home now. Everyone's accounted for. The youngest child is frightened, can sense the tension in the adults even if she doesn't fully understand why. Your wife is checking supplies, making sure you have water stored inside, food prepared, candles and rushlights ready, because who knows how long you'll be confined to this space. The light outside is strange now, that eerie greenish glow that comes before violent weather. The wind is picking up seriously. You can hear it starting to roar, can feel the house shudder slightly with the gusts. The animals in the corner are making anxious sounds. Your children press close to you and your wife. Everyone's waiting. Then the first drops hit. Not gentle rain, but heavy drops that sound like stones striking the thatch. Patter, 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 becoming a roar within seconds as the rain intensifies. The sound is overwhelming, like standing under a waterfall. You have to raise your voice to be heard over it. The thatch is doing its job so far, shedding the water, but you watch the ceiling carefully, looking for drips, for wet spots that might indicate a breach. Thunder rumbles, distant at first, then closer, deeper, the kind of thunder you feel in your chest as much as here. Your youngest child starts to cry. Your wife pulls her close, starts singing softly, one of those old songs mothers have sung to frighten children for generations. The melody is barely audible under the rain's roar, but it's comforting, familiar, human warmth against nature's violence. Lightning flashes, so bright it comes through the cracks around your shutters, illuminating your dim interior for a split second in harsh white light. You count automatically. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then thunder crashes, loud enough to make everyone jump. 4 seconds means the lightning was maybe a mile away. The storm is right on top of you now.
This is when medieval people prayed. Not casually, not as routine religious observance, but desperately, urgently, believing absolutely that God or saints might protect you if you asked properly. Your wife pulls out her prayer beads, begins murmuring Ave Marias, the familiar Latin words running together in her anxiety. You make the sign of the cross, start your own prayers, calling on Saint Barbara, the patron saint of protection from lightning and storms. Everyone in the village is doing the same thing right now. In every house, families are praying, asking for protection, promising offerings if they survive, bargaining with the divine. This isn't superstition to them, it's practical. Storms kill people regularly. Houses collapse, lightning strikes, floods sweep through villages. You know people who've died in storms. Prayer is your only defense beyond physical preparation. The church bell is ringing again, audible even through the storm's roar. The priest is in the church tower, pulling the bell rope continuously because church bells were believed to have power against storms. The consecrated bronze, blessed by holy rituals, was thought to disrupt the demons that rode storm winds, to protect the community through sacred sound. Whether you believe that or not, the bell is comforting. It means the priest is still there, the church still stands, the community endures. The wind is reaching terrifying levels now. Your house is shaking. You can feel the timbers creaking, can hear the thatch rustling and straining against the ropes that hold it down. Medieval houses weren't built like modern structures. They were lighter, more flexible, which actually helped them survive wind because they could move slightly, could give with the gusts instead of resisting rigidly and breaking. But this flexibility also means you can feel every gust, feel the whole structure swaying slightly, and that's absolutely terrifying when you're inside. You're trusting your life to wooden frames held together with wooden pegs and rope, to walls made of woven sticks and mud, to a roof made of straw. You've built it well. You've maintained it.
Water starts coming in. Not through the roof yet, but around the door, seeping under the bottom edge, despite your best efforts to seal it. Your wife quickly rolls up a cloth and presses it against the gap, but water is persistent, finding ways through. A drip appears in the corner of the ceiling, small at first, just a drop every few seconds. You grab a wooden bowl and position it to catch the drips. The sound of water hitting the bowl adds to the cacophony of rain and thunder. Your older child, maybe 8 or 9 years old, is old enough to understand the danger, but not old enough to hide his fear. He's pressed against you, and you put your arm around him, trying to project calm you don't fully feel. "It's all right," you tell him, having to speak loudly over the storm. "The house is strong. God protects us. This will pass." You repeat these assurances, as much for yourself as for him. More drips appear. The thatch is soaking through in places, the sheer volume of water overwhelming its capacity to shed. You scramble to position more bowls, more pots, anything that can catch water. Your floor, already just packed earth, is turning muddy. The animals in the corner are standing in water now, making distressed sounds. There's nothing you can do about that. You're all getting wet, all getting cold, all miserable. This is when you realize you won't be sleeping tonight. No one sleeps during storms like this. It's not just the noise, though that would be enough. It's the constant work of monitoring the situation, catching leaks, checking that nothing's failing catastrophically, keeping children calm, keeping yourself calm. Sleep is impossible, and attempting it would be dangerous. You need to stay alert, ready to react if something goes seriously wrong. Lightning strikes closer now, the flash and thunder nearly simultaneous. Your daughter screams, buries her face against your wife. The light was blinding, even through the shutters. The thunder wasn't just sound, it was physical force, shaking the house, rattling your bones. For a moment, you genuinely thought the lightning hit your house, and the terror of that moment leaves you shaking. But You're still here. The house is still standing. You're alive. You breathe. Try to steady yourself. Your wife meets your eyes across the dim interior, and you see the same fear there, but also determination. You'll get through this together, as you've gotten through everything else.
Hours pass this way. Time becomes strange during storms. You can't see outside, can't judge time by the sun. Your only clock is the storm itself, which goes through cycles. Sometimes the rain eases slightly, giving you hope it's ending. Then it intensifies again, dashing that hope. The thunder moves around, close, then distant, then close again, as different parts of the storm pass over. You light a candle, needing the psychological comfort of light, even though it barely illuminates the space. The flame flickers in drafts you can't see, makes shadows dance on the walls. In the dim light, your family looks exhausted, frightened, but enduring. Your wife has kept the children relatively calm through sheer force of maternal will. Your elderly parent, sitting in the corner, is praying continuously, lips moving in constant supplication. Suddenly, a new sound rises above the storm, a cracking, tearing sound that makes your heart stop. Something nearby has failed, broken, collapsed. You can't see what, but you hear it clearly. Hear the crash as something wooden gives way. You pray it's not a house, not someone's home collapsing on them. You won't know until morning, won't be able to check, won't be able to help even if you wanted to. The storm is too dangerous to go outside. You're all isolated, each family alone in their shelter, hoping everyone else is surviving too. The wind shifts direction, coming from the east now instead of the west, and suddenly you're getting rain on a different side of the house. A new leak appears, this one worse than the others, water streaming down the wall. You and your wife work together to position a larger bucket, to pile spare cloth against the wall, to divert water away from where the children are sitting. Everything is soaking wet now. Your clothes, the children's clothes, the blankets, everything. You're shivering. It's not winter yet, but it's autumn, and wet, combined with wind, creates bone-deep cold. Your fire in the hearth is struggling, dampness affecting the wood, smoke filling the room more than usual because the storm is disrupting the chimney draft. You're cold, wet, breathing smoky air, exhausted, and there's nothing to do but endure. Your wife starts singing again, teaching the children an old song, trying to distract them from their misery. The song is about Saint Swithin, who supposedly controls rain, asking him to make it stop. The melody is simple, repetitive, and soon you join in, your whole family singing together under the roar of the storm. It doesn't make the storm stop, but it helps. It gives you something to focus on besides fear and discomfort. Other sounds reach you through the storm, a door slamming somewhere, banging repeatedly in the wind. Someone shouting, words lost in the wind, but the tone clear. Distress, urgency. Dogs barking, that frantic barking that means they're frightened. A crash as something, maybe a cart or a fence, breaks loose and tumbles through the village. Each sound tells a story of damage, of destruction, of people struggling just like you.
The worst part is the not knowing. You don't know if your neighbors are okay. You don't know what damage the storm is doing to the fields, to the crops you need to survive the winter. You don't know if the church is still standing, if the mill has survived, if the bridge over the stream has been washed away. You're isolated in your small wooden box, surrounded by chaos, able only to protect your immediate family and hope the broader community is surviving too. Around midnight, based on your best guess of time, something changes. The rain is still heavy, but the wind eases slightly. The thunder is moving away, rumbles becoming more distant.
Your wife notices it too, meets your eyes with cautious hope. Is it passing? She asks. You listen carefully, trying to read the storm's mood. Maybe it's moving on. But you don't relax yet. Storms can have multiple waves. What seems like the end might just be a lull before it intensifies again. You've seen that before. Experienced storms that seem to end, only to roar back to life even worse. So you stay alert, stay watchful, even as exhaustion pulls at you. Your children have finally fallen asleep, despite everything, huddled together in the driest corner you could create for them, using your own body to shield them from drafts. Their breathing is soft and regular, somehow sleeping through conditions that would seem impossible. Children adapt, find peace where adults see only danger. Looking at them sleeping, you feel a surge of love and protectiveness, so intense it's almost painful. The rain continues, but lighter now, steady instead of torrential. The thunder is definitely moving away, just distant rumbles. The wind has dropped from a roar to a strong blow. You're still wet, still cold, still surrounded by muddy water and distressed animals, but the worst seems to be over. You survived. Probably. You won't know for sure until you can see the damage in daylight.
Your wife slumps against you, exhausted beyond measure. You put your arm around her, and for a long moment, you just sit together in silence, broken only by rain and your children's breathing. No words are necessary. You've weathered this together, as you weather everything, as medieval couples had to do constantly. Life was a series of storms, literal and metaphorical, and you survived them together, or not at all. You can't sleep, though your body screams for it. Someone needs to stay alert, keep watch, make sure no new crisis develops. So you sit through the long hours of darkness, listening to the rain ease gradually from heavy to moderate to light, listening to the wind die down, listening to the storm move away into the distance where it will terrorize some other village. Finally, imperceptibly at first, the darkness begins to lessen. Not sunrise yet, but that pre-dawn gray that means morning is coming. You've made it through the night. Your family is safe. Your house, though wet and damaged, still stands. Relief washes through you so intensely, you feel tears prickling your eyes. As soon as there's enough light to see, you carefully open your door. The world outside is transformed. Water everywhere, running in streams through the village, pooling in every depression, debris scattered around, broken branches, torn thatch, pieces of fencing, items you can't even identify. The air smells of wet earth, broken vegetation, and that peculiar clean smell that comes after storms. Other doors are opening now too. Your neighbors emerging, looking as exhausted and bedraggled as you feel. There's a moment of silence as everyone looks around, assesses, counts heads. Then someone calls out, "The Millers are all right," and someone else responds, "The Smiths made it!" And one by one, families confirm they've survived. But not everyone. You see people moving toward one house where part of the roof is collapsed, where family members are crying out. The community immediately mobilizes, people splashing through mud and water to help, to dig through debris, to see who can be saved. This is medieval community life. You survive together, help each other, because next time it might be your house, your family needing rescue. The damage is extensive. Several roofs partially collapsed, countless leaks, fences destroyed. The vegetable gardens you all depend on are flooded and battered. A large tree is down across the path to the church. The church itself is still standing, but has damage you can see even from a distance. The mill survived, but its water wheel is tangled with debris.
The priest emerges from the church, having spent the entire night there ringing bells and praying. He looks like he's aged 10 years overnight, exhausted and pale, but he immediately begins organizing the community response. Who needs help first? Who has injuries? What's the priority for repairs? The priest in medieval villages is often the de facto leader in emergencies, and he takes that role seriously now. You join the men gathering to help with the collapsed roof, but first you check your animals. They've survived, traumatized and filthy, but alive. You quickly move them back outside, needing to reclaim your living space. Your wife and the older women begin the massive task of drying things out, of assessing what can be saved and what's ruined. Children, resilient as always, are already exploring the storm's aftermath, fascinated by the destruction, the altered landscape. They're splashing in puddles, examining debris, treating it like an adventure now that the danger has passed. You envy their ability to move on so quickly, to find joy even in disaster's wake. The work begins immediately because it has to. You can't afford to wait, to rest, to recover. Every hour of daylight needs to be used. Roofs must be patched before the next rain. Water needs to be drained from buildings. Crops need to be assessed and salvaged if possible. Animals need care. The mill needs to be functional because the whole village depends on it. You work alongside your neighbors, everyone helping everyone. Class distinctions blur during disaster response. The wealthy merchant works beside the poor laborer, both soaked and muddy, both hauling debris and patching roofs. This communal response is how medieval villages survived. No one could do it alone, but together, pooling labor and resources, most could rebuild. By afternoon, you're so exhausted you can barely stand, but significant progress has been made. The family whose roof collapsed has temporary shelter. The most dangerous debris is cleared. Emergency repairs are completed on the worst damaged buildings. Everyone is filthy, soaked, exhausted, running on adrenaline and communal obligation. That evening, as darkness approaches again, there's collective anxiety. Will another storm come? Your house still has leaks, still has damage. You're not ready for another night like the last one. But the sky is clearing, showing patches of blue between clouds. The wind is calm. The animals are settling peacefully. The signs suggest the weather is stable, at least for now.
You gather your family inside again. Everything is still damp, still uncomfortable, but it's better than last night. You have a fire going strong now, helping to dry things out. You have food, simple but nourishing. You're together, safe, alive. Your wife looks at you across the hearth, and despite her exhaustion, she smiles. You've made it through. That night, you finally sleep. Not well, still alert for sounds of weather, still uncomfortable on damp bedding, but you sleep because your body demands it. The sleep of exhaustion, of survival, of knowing you've done everything possible and now must rest. Over the following days, the full extent of the damage becomes clear. Several families lost significant portions of their stored food when roofs leaked. Crops in the fields suffered, some destroyed entirely, others merely damaged. The wheat that was almost ready for harvest is flattened, making it much harder to collect. This will affect everyone's food supply through the winter. The community has discussions about how to distribute the losses fairly, how to help families who suffered worst, how to prioritize repairs with limited resources. These discussions sometimes become heated. Disaster brings out both the best and worst in people. But eventually, decisions are made, plans are formed, work continues. The church suffered damage that will take weeks to repair. The priest organizes work parties, and people donate labor even though they have their own repairs to manage. The church is communal property, everyone's spiritual home, and its restoration is a shared responsibility. Working together on it builds bonds, reminds people why community matters. Children who were terrified during the storm now play games about storms, reenacting their experience, processing their trauma through play. They build small shelters and knock them down, make storm sounds, comfort pretend frightened dolls. This is how they learn, how they prepare for the next time. Because there will always be
Your
next
wife
time.
works tirelessly to dry everything, to clean the mud, to restore some order to your home. She's frustrated by how much was damaged, worried about winter preparations that were set back, but she doesn't complain much. Complaining doesn't fix anything, and medieval people are pragmatic by necessity. You work with what you have, you rebuild, you move forward. Weeks pass before life returns to something resembling normal. Some damage, particularly to crops, can't be fully repaired. The village will have less food stored for winter than planned, which means careful rationing, harder times ahead. But you've survived before on less, and you'll survive again. This is the constant mathematics of medieval life, calculating survival, balancing resources, hoping for good fortune, and preparing for bad. The storm becomes a landmark in village memory. Time is marked as before the big storm and after the big storm. Stories are told about it, details embellished slightly with each telling. The thunder was louder than it actually was, the wind stronger, the danger greater. This is how oral history works, how communities remember and transmit experience across generations. Children who experience the storm will tell their own children about it someday, teaching them what to do when storms come, how to prepare, how to survive. Knowledge passes down this way, through stories and experience, through generations of people learning to read weather signs and secure homes and stay calm when thunder crashes overhead. The experience has changed you subtly. You're more attentive to weather signs now, more likely to prepare early when conditions look threatening. You check your roof more frequently, maintain it better, knowing firsthand what happens when it fails. You're more conscious of community bonds, more likely to help neighbors with their preparations, knowing you might need their help next time. Because there will be a next time. This is something medieval people understood deeply. Disaster is not an if, but a when. Storms will come again. Crops will fail. Animals will die. Houses will need repair. This isn't pessimism, it's realism. Life includes suffering, includes loss, includes nights of terror huddled with your family while nature rages outside. But life also includes survival, includes sunrise after the longest night, includes neighbors working together to rebuild, includes children playing in puddles. Include your wife's hand in yours as you survey damage and begin planning repairs. Medieval people didn't have the illusion that life should be easy or safe. They knew it was hard, dangerous, often brutal. And they built their lives and communities around that knowledge. The storms shaped medieval architecture and settlement patterns. Villages were built with attention to drainage, houses positioned to minimize wind damage, roofs designed to shed water efficiently. Every generation added knowledge, learned from failures, improved techniques. The house you live in represents centuries of accumulated wisdom about surviving weather. Storms also shaped medieval religion and spirituality. The sheer power of nature, the helplessness humans felt before it, drove people toward faith, toward belief in forces greater than themselves that might offer protection. The prayers said during storms weren't just ritual. They were desperate reaches for help, for comfort, for some sense of control in situations where humans had none. The storm bells rung from church towers. That practice existed across medieval Europe, reflected this spiritual understanding of weather. Storms weren't just meteorological events. They were spiritual battles, demons in the wind that needed to be driven off with consecrated bronze. Whether the bells actually did anything or not, they provided psychological comfort, reminded people they weren't alone, that the church was watching over them. Different saints were invoked for different types of storms. Saint Barbara for lightning, Saint Medard for rain, Saint Erasmus for sailors facing storms at sea. This proliferation of specialized saints reflected medieval attempts to categorize and control through spiritual means what couldn't be controlled physically. If you couldn't stop the storm, at least you could pray to the right saint who might intercede on your behalf.
Some regions developed elaborate storm rituals that entire communities would perform together. Processions around village boundaries, carrying holy relics, blessed candles lit in every window, specific prayers recited in unison at specific times. These communal rituals served multiple purposes: spiritual protection, certainly, but also social cohesion, giving everyone something to do together, creating collective action against collective threat. The aftermath of serious storms often included special church services, masses of thanksgiving for survival, prayers for those who died, blessings for repairs and rebuilding. The entire village would attend, standing together in damaged buildings, acknowledging what they'd endured, seeking comfort and meaning in shared ritual. These services helped communities process trauma collectively, gave a religious framework to experiences that might otherwise be overwhelming. Storms also affected medieval economies in ways modern people rarely consider. A single severe storm could destroy months of labor in hours, crops flattened, buildings damaged, animals killed, stored goods ruined. The economic impact rippled through communities for months or years. This constant vulnerability to weather meant medieval people could never feel truly secure, could never build much surplus, always lived close to the edge of disaster. This economic precariousness shaped medieval attitudes and behaviors in profound ways. The emphasis on community mutual aid wasn't just moral teaching, it was survival strategy. Today, you help your neighbor whose roof collapsed, because next year it might be your roof, your family needing help. This mutual dependence created tight community bonds, but also tensions, obligations, complex webs of debt and reciprocity that defined social relationships. Wealthy individuals and institutions like monasteries sometimes provided storm relief to poorer community members, distributing food or helping with repairs. This charity was partly religious obligation, but also social investment, maintaining the labor force the wealthy depended on, preventing desperate people from stealing or rebelling. Storm relief was thus both compassionate and pragmatic, serving multiple purposes simultaneously. The seasonal timing of storms mattered enormously. Spring storms could destroy newly planted crops, meaning the entire year's food supply was jeopardized. Summer storms could batter ripening grain. Autumn storms, like the one you survived, could destroy harvest just when it was ready to collect. Winter storms brought different dangers: cold, isolation, buildings collapsing under snow weight, animals freezing. Each season's storms had specific characteristics and threats that medieval people learned to anticipate and prepare for.
The knowledge of how to read weather signs, predict storms, prepare effectively, all this was passed down carefully from generation to generation. Grandparents taught grandchildren, experienced farmers taught younger ones. Communities collectively maintained weather wisdom that could mean the difference between survival and catastrophe. This knowledge was valuable, respected, essential. Some individuals developed reputations as particularly skilled weather readers, people who could predict storms more accurately than others. These weather prophets, whether they had genuine skill or just good luck, gained status and influence in their communities. People would consult them when planning travel, timing harvests, making any decision where weather mattered. The superstitions that grew up around storms, many of which modern people dismiss as foolish, often had practical cores. Don't shelter under trees during lightning storms. Actually good advice, as trees are struck frequently. Make sure fires are properly banked during storms. Prevents houses catching fire when thatch gets wet and shifts. Bring animals inside during severe weather. Protects valuable livestock. The spiritual framing might seem irrational, but the practices often had sound practical basis. Medieval people's relationship with nature was more intimate than ours, but not more romantic. They didn't idealize nature. They knew it was beautiful, but also brutal, life-giving, but also life-destroying. Storms were perfect examples of this duality. Rain was essential for crops, but too much rain destroyed those same crops. Wind cooled summer heat, but also tore roofs away. Thunder was God's voice, but also terrifying force that killed people. This nuanced understanding of nature, neither worshiping it nor seeking to dominate it completely, shaped medieval environmental attitudes. You worked with nature where possible, adapted to it when necessary, tried to protect against its worst excesses. But you never forgot that nature was powerful, that humans were vulnerable, that survival required constant attention and effort. The long-term psychological effects of living with such weather vulnerability are hard for modern people to fully grasp. Medieval people experienced regular trauma, watching their work destroyed, fearing for their lives, losing loved ones to weather events. They developed resilience, certainly, but also carried ongoing anxiety, knew that security was always temporary, that disaster could come any night with thunder and wind. This anxiety shaped medieval personalities and worldviews in ways that influenced entire cultures. The emphasis on faith, on accepting God's will, on finding meaning in suffering, all this partly reflected attempts to cope with constant environmental threat. If storms were God's will, then surviving them was blessing, and losing to them was divine plan rather than meaningless tragedy. Religion provided a framework for processing trauma that would otherwise be overwhelming. Children growing up with regular storm experiences developed differently than modern children who experience weather mostly as inconvenience. Medieval children learned early that nature was dangerous, that safety was conditional, that family and community were essential for survival. These lessons shaped their entire lives, influenced how they raised their own children, perpetuated cultural attitudes across generations. The stories told about storms, passed down through families and communities, served educational purposes. Tales of people who ignored weather signs and suffered. Stories of communities that worked together and survived. Accounts of particularly severe storms and their aftermath all taught lessons about preparation, cooperation, resilience. These weren't just entertainment, they were survival curriculum. Some medieval art and literature reflect storm experiences, though less than you might expect, because storms were so common they weren't considered especially noteworthy. But illuminated manuscripts sometimes show storm scenes. Architecture includes storm protective features. Prayers and hymns reference weather frequently. The cultural fingerprints of storm-shaped lives are everywhere, if you know how to look for them. Medieval technology development was partly driven by storm experience. Better roofing techniques, improved building methods, drainage systems, all evolved through trial and error over centuries of storm damage and repair. Every generation learned from predecessors' failures, made incremental improvements, passed knowledge forward. The buildings that survived became templates, their techniques studied and copied. The introduction of new building materials and methods, when they occurred, was often resisted, not from blind conservatism, but from hard-earned wisdom. Traditional techniques had proven themselves through countless storms. New methods were untested, potentially dangerous. The conservatism of medieval building practices reflected genuine concern about survival, not just unwillingness to change. Storms influenced settlement patterns in subtle ways. Villages established in locations with natural storm protection, valleys that channeled wind safely, hillsides that drained well, positions relative to prevailing weather patterns. These decisions weren't always conscious or based on perfect understanding, but over time, settlements in poorly chosen locations tended to be abandoned, while well-positioned ones thrived. The medieval landscape itself was shaped by storm management. Ditches and channels dug for drainage, trees planted as windbreaks, walls and hedges positioned to deflect wind, all created modified environments that provided some storm protection. This landscape engineering was mostly small scale, done by individual families and communities rather than large organized projects, but cumulatively, it transformed environments significantly. Storms also affected medieval travel and communication. Roads became impassable, rivers flooded, bridges washed away. A severe storm could isolate communities for days or weeks, cutting off trade, preventing news from spreading, trapping travelers far from home. This isolation was dangerous when you needed help or supplies, when invaders might attack, when disease might be spreading. Storm damage to infrastructure had cascading effects throughout society. Merchants and traders developed strategies for storm risk management, travel in groups for mutual support, carry extra supplies in case of delays, establish relationships with communities along routes for emergency shelter, watch weather carefully, and hole up when conditions looked dangerous. The most successful merchants were often those who best managed weather risk rather than those who took chances. Military campaigns were profoundly affected by storms. Armies caught in severe weather could be decimated, equipment destroyed, morale shattered, supply lines cut. Many medieval battles and sieges were decided not by strategy or courage, but by weather. A well-timed storm could save a besieged city or destroy an advancing army. Military leaders had to be weather prophets as much as tactical geniuses.
Ships and sailors faced storms even more directly and dangerously. Medieval sailing vessels were vulnerable to weather, and storms at sea were often death sentences. Entire fleets could be lost, hundreds of men drowned, cargo worth fortunes sent to the ocean floor. Maritime communities lived with constant awareness that storms could take their men and never return them. The prayers said in coastal communities during storms reflected this maritime anxiety. Women would gather at churches or shorelines, praying for husbands and sons at sea, watching horizons for returning ships, dreading the news that storms had taken their loved ones. The widows created by storms were a recognized social category requiring community support. Storms shaped medieval laws and customs in interesting ways. Salvage rights for storm-wrecked ships, obligations to help storm victims, insurance-like arrangements where communities agreed to share storm losses, all developed through practical necessity. When everyone faced similar risks, creating systems to distribute those risks made sense for everyone. The concept of acts of God in legal and religious contexts largely referred to weather events like storms. If your barn collapsed in a storm, you couldn't be held responsible for contracts you couldn't fulfill because of it. This legal recognition that weather was beyond human control provided some protection against disaster's economic consequences, though it couldn't prevent the disaster itself. The night you spent huddled with your family while the storm raged, that experience was shared by millions of medieval people across centuries. The specific details varied, different regions, different house types, different prayers, but the essential experience was the same. Fear, discomfort, family closeness, community dependence, helplessness before nature's power, relief at survival. Modern people who experience major storms, even with all our advantages of technology and infrastructure, can glimpse something of what medieval people felt regularly. That moment when power goes out and you're in darkness listening to wind, that anxiety about whether your roof will hold, that relief when dawn comes and you've survived. These are timeless human experiences, connecting us across centuries to our ancestors. The difference is that modern storms are aberrations, events that disrupt normal life temporarily. Medieval storms were normal life, regular occurrences that shaped everything. We can return to normal after storms pass, restore power, repair with modern tools and materials. They had to rebuild with the same vulnerable materials and methods, knowing the next storm would test them again. Understanding what life was like during medieval storms helps us appreciate both how far we've come and what we've lost. We have better shelter, better prediction, better resources for recovery. We're safer, more comfortable, less vulnerable. But we've also lost some of the community cohesion, the resilience, the intimate relationship with nature that storms created. Medieval people would envy our storm protection, but might pity our isolation, our disconnect from natural rhythms, our assumption that comfort and safety are rights rather than privileges. They knew that survival required community, that security was always temporary, that nature was a powerful force demanding respect and adaptation. So tonight, if you hear thunder in the distance or rain against your window, maybe you'll think about your medieval ancestors. Think about families huddled together in wooden houses, praying while thatch roofs leaked and wind roared. Think about entire communities staying awake together, monitoring, preparing, helping each other survive. Think about the dawn after the longest night, the relief of survival, the work of rebuilding beginning immediately. You're connected to them through the same experience of storm, the same weather patterns that have been moving across landscapes for millennia. The thunder they heard is the same thunder you hear. The rain falling on your roof falls on the same ground their rain fell on. The wind that shakes your windows shook their shutters.
But you're safer now. Warmer, drier, more secure. Your roof won't leak, probably. Your house won't collapse. You won't spend the night in terror with your children, catching drips in wooden bowls, praying desperately for dawn. You can sleep through storms or listen to them peacefully, finding the sound soothing rather than threatening. This is progress. This is good. This is what countless generations worked toward. Shelter that actually shelters. Security that's real rather than hoped for. Communities that can withstand weather without being devastated. Appreciate it. This safety that seems normal to you, but would have seemed miraculous to your ancestors. And as you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps to the sound of rain that no longer threatens you, rest easy knowing that you're safer than humans have ever been from weather's fury. The storms still come, but they can't reach you, can't hurt you, can't keep you awake with terror. You've inherited centuries of accumulated wisdom about shelter and safety. You live in the world your ancestors dreamed of, where storms are weather rather than disasters. Sleep well, secure and dry, while rain drums peacefully on your solid roof. Your medieval ancestors would be so happy for you, knowing that their descendants finally achieved what they could only hope for, true shelter from the storm. Good night, and may you rest peacefully through whatever weather comes, knowing you're protected in ways they never were, but always wished for.